Hi everyone! Today we are making 6 different kinds of okonomiyaki. With so many variations, you're sure to find your new favorite. Let's start with the classic okonomiyaki. And by the way, don't forget to stick around till the end of the video because I'll show you how to make a vegetarian okonomiyaki and my homemade okonomiyaki sauce. Now, the most important ingredient for okonomiyaki is cabbage. Make sure you get a fresh one. You can cut into small pieces, but if you're in a hurry, bigger chunks are fine too. This is a Naga-imo or Chinese yam. It's really slippery and watery. Adding this makes the okonomiyaki super fluffy. That's why it's so popular. It also means you can use less flour, making it healthier. If you don't have any, it's okay to skip it. Let's mix the grated Naga-imo with the cabbage. In a separate bowl, we'll make batter for okonomiyaki. This makes it easier later on. We'll add flour, eggs, dashi powder, water, soy sauce, mirin, and salt. Even though we'll be topping our okonomiyaki with a special sauce, adding flavor to the batter itself makes it taste even better. Once it's well mixed, pour it into the bowl with the cabbage. Before we do that, let's add some tempura bits and Beni-shoga, pickled ginger. Making tempura bits is super easy. Just mix flour and water in a 1:1 ratio and drop it into hot oil. These two are also essential for takoyaki. Again, you can skip them if you want. To be honest, you can make okonomiyaki with just cabbage, butter, and the pork we'll add later. For this batter, you'll need about 2 scoops per serving. If you're not using Naga-imo, you might need a bit more. Just mix it and see if you need to add more. Once it has a good consistency, we are ready to go. Now let's cut the pork. I bought thinly sliced pork from the butcher today. Usually, restaurants use pork belly, but they were sold out, so I'm using pork loin instead. In restaurants, they often use long slices, but I prefer to cut it into bite-sized pieces. Heat up a fry pan and add some oil. Any kind of oil will do. Let's lower the heat. You can add the pork before or after the cabbage, but this time let's add it first. Spread the pork so it doesn't overlap. If it takes too long, you can turn off the heat for a moment. Once the pork is in a circle, add all the cabbage. Turn the heat up to medium and cook for 3 minutes. Putting a lid on it will help the butter set and make it easier to flip. I learned that the hard way. After 3 minutes, flip it over. The pork stuck to this stainless steel pan, so I'm going to switch to a non-stick pan. It might not look perfect, but it's good enough. It's best if the pork doesn't curl up and gets crispy. Once you flip it, lower the heat, put the lid on, and cook for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, take the lid off and cook for another 1 to 2 minutes until the surface is slightly crispy. To make sure the pork is crispy, I cook it with the pork side down at the end. The other side looks good too, so we are done. Plate it up and pour plenty of okonomiyaki sauce on top. I'm using Otafuku brand sauce. Any brand will do, but I recommend using a sauce specifically made for okonomiyaki. If you don't have this sauce, I'll show you how to make a very similar sauce at the end of the video. Don't forget the Kewpie mayonnaise. Sprinkle on some bonito flakes and aonori if you like. And finish with pickled ginger. And there you have it. Alright, let's make Hiroshima-style Okonomiyaki. This one is a bit different from the classic one we made earlier. Instead of mixing everything together before cooking, we are going to layer the ingredients. It's called kasaneyaki, which means layered cooking. And because it has noodles, it's so much tastier and my personal favorite. It's easier to make on a big iron plate in a restaurant, but don't worry, it's totally doable at home. If you follow my method, you'll be able to make it without any trouble. It's really easy, so give it a try. We've already prepared the cabbage and meat just like before. First, we'll cook the egg. I'm making 1 serving, so I'll use 1 egg. If you really love eggs, you can use 2. Let's heat up a little oil in the fry pan and spread the egg thinly. I've decided to stick with a non-stick pan for this okonomiyaki series. Okay, so the whites are a bit uneven, but it's fine. Once it's cooked, let's transfer it to a big plate. Next, let's fry the noodles. These are pre-cooked yakisoba noodles that are already coated in oil, so we don't need to add any more oil. Just fry them quickly until they are separated. I added a little sake to loosen the noodles. Water is fine too. If you're using fresh or dried noodles, boil them first, rinse them well with water, and then fry them. Add some oil if needed and fry. Once the noodles are warmed through, let's season them with Worcestershire sauce or okonomiyaki sauce. I actually wanted to use Worcestershire sauce for a bit of a tangy flavor, but I ran out, so I'm using okonomiyaki sauce instead. My husband actually prefers this one. Japanese Worcestershire sauce, like Bulldog, has a sharp taste from vegetable, fruit, and spices, while okonomiyaki sauce is sweeter and has a stronger dashi flavor. They are quite different, so I recommend trying both. This is optional, but I added a bit of bonito flakes. We'll be adding more sauce at the end, so we don't need to season it too strongly now. But it still looks a bit bland, so let's add a little more. Once the noodles are seasoned, let's move them onto the cooked egg and spread them out to match the shape of the egg. Next, let's make a crepe. I'm using the leftover batter from the classic okonomiyaki. It has flour, water, eggs, and seasonings, but you can just use flour and water if you want. When making the crepe, sprinkle a little bonito flakes on it if you have any. I should have added it before the batter set, but I forgot. Since I added it after it set, it didn't really mix into the batter. It's fine though. Flip it over and cook the other side for a little bit. Place this on top of the noodles. Now let's cook the pork. If the pan looks like it might stick, add some oil. Just like in the first recipe, spread the pork out so it doesn't overlap. Keep the heat low for this one. Pork belly would be even juicier, but pork loin is delicious too. Add a little tempura bits and green onion to the pork. I was supposed to add bean sprouts, but I forgot to buy them, so I'm using green onion instead. Many Hiroshima-style Okonomiyaki restaurants use bean sprout to add volume, but you can skip the bean sprout or green onion and just use cabbage if you want. Once you've added plenty of cabbage, cover it with the clay you made earlier. It's like putting a lid on it. We are going to steam the vegetable in this state. You can increase the heat a bit, but it takes a while for all the cabbage to wilt. And since we'll be cooking it for a long time, it might be better to keep the heat low. You can leave it on low heat for about 10 minutes. Press down on the cabbage with a spatula to squeeze out the moisture. If there is too much moisture, it will become soggy. The cabbage on top will be the slowest to wilt, so you might want to lift the clay occasionally and rearrange the cabbage. Once the cabbage is cooked through and everything is wilted, it's done. Transfer everything onto the noodles. And once everything is together, flip it over. With the egg on top, it looks just like the Hiroshima-style Okonomiyaki you get at a restaurant. I'm using Otafuku Okonomiyaki sauce. Sprinkle on some aonori and it's finished. Of course, mayonnaise goes great with it too. Next up, we are making an extra cheesy okonomiyaki. This is seriously addictive. I've never added cheese to my okonomiyaki before, but now I'm definitely going to do it every time. First, let's cut the cabbage just like we did before. In the bowl, let's add the flour, then add water, dashi powder, soy sauce, and mirin. You can skip the mirin if you don't have any. Since the cheese is salty, you might only need dashi powder or just a little bit of soy sauce for seasoning. Once it's well mixed, add the cabbage. Okonomiyaki is a great way to get a lot of delicious cabbage, which is packed with vitamin C and fiber. Now let's add the cheese. You can use any kind you like. I decided to skip the tempura bits and pickled ginger this time. I thought it would let the cheese flavor shine. By the way, when you go to an okonomiyaki restaurant, they often have a menu where you can choose your favorite toppings to add to a base of cabbage and butter. Some have meat as the main ingredient, while others have toppings like cheese, mochi, or seafood. Some people even add kimchi or natto. The best part about okonomiyaki is that you can customize it with whatever you like. That's what okonomi means. Okay, let's cook it. First, let's cook the pork on low heat. I got some pork belly, so I'm going to use that. It's so delicious when it's crispy. Since pork belly is quite oily, I didn't add any extra oil. Of course, you can make it without meat too. If you do, I recommend adding some oil. Once the pork is spread out, add the cabbage. Use a spatula to shape it. I was trying to make it as round as possible, but my husband asked me why okonomiyaki has to be round. I guess a square okonomiyaki would be fine too. Maybe it's just easier to flip when it's round. After making so many okonomiyaki today, I realized that it's better to cover it with a lid from the beginning. So let's cover it and cook it over medium heat for 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, flip it over. The pork belly is perfectly crispy. Lower the heat and cook for another 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, cook for another 1 to 2 minutes until the surface is slightly crispy. Now let's add some more cheese if you like. You can use a kitchen torch to melt it, but I'm just going to cover it with a lid to melt the cheese, even if you don't cover it. The cheese will melt eventually, but feel free to add as much cheese as you want. Then add some green onion and a raw egg yolk. You can customize this part however you like. You can use a fried egg instead or any other way you prefer. Since the cheese is salty, you might not need a lot of okonomiyaki sauce. Next, let's make negiyaki. Negiyaki is similar to okonomiyaki, but it originated in the kinki region of Japan, Western Japan. As the name suggests, the star of the show is green onion, not cabbage. Although I'm going to add a little bit of cabbage because I didn't have that much green onion. A lot of people add a bit of cabbage to their negiyaki too. I think it balances the flavor really well. But since green onion are the star, let's use plenty of them. We'll use both the green and white parts. You can use leeks or green onion, whichever you prefer. And let's prepare some pork belly. For the sauce, I'm going to make a special negiyaki sauce using not only okonomiyaki sauce, but also mentiu noodle soup base. I'll use a 2:1 ratio of okonomiyaki sauce to mentiu. This combination is perfect for negiyaki. If you don't have mentiu, you can make a quick substitute by mixing soy sauce, mirin, and dashi powder. Check out the link in the description for the detailed recipe. Okonomiyaki sauce is quite sweet, so combining it with mentiu gives it a sharper flavor that pairs really well with the green onions. Of course, you can just use okonomiyaki sauce if you prefer. Once the sauce is ready, let's put some flour in the bowl. Add water and mix well. Add the chopped green onion and cabbage. Make sure to wash the vegetable well and drain them thoroughly. I bought some pre-cut green onion, but I had a little bit left in the fridge, so I'm going to add that too. If you have tempura bits and pickled ginger, add those as well. If not, it's okay to skip them. After mixing, I realized I forgot to add the seasoning. Add some dashi powder, salt, and a little sugar. You can also add a bit of soy sauce for seasoning. In authentic negiyaki, they often add simmered beef tendon and konjac. While simmered beef tendon is delicious and a dish on its own, it's quite time-consuming to prepare and beef tendon isn't always available at the supermarket, so I'm going to skip it this time. I'd love to try authentic Negiyaki someday. Heat up fry pan with some oil and add the butter. I'm going to add the pork later, but you can add it first if you prefer. I'm not sure which way is better. But either way, the pork will be delicious when it's crispy. Cook it over medium heat for 3 minutes. Then flip it over. This time I was able to flip it without a lid. Lower the heat, cover it, and steam it for 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, let's check the pork. I want it to be a bit crispier, so let's flip it over. There's a lot of oil coming out of the pork belly, so let's wipe it off with a paper towel. Cook it for a few more minutes until it's crispy. Then transfer it to a plate. Pour the special sauce on top. And sprinkle some bonito flakes if you like. This is optional, but I added a fried egg. I mentioned earlier that authentic Negiyaki often includes beef tendon, but some places also add eggs. I prefer to add it as a topping instead of mixing it into the batter. It's delicious to eat the runny egg yolk with the Negiyaki. Finally, sprinkle some green onion on top. And it's done. My husband really loves this Negiyaki. He says the soft and melty green onion combined with the crispy pork belly is the perfect combination. Next up, let's make a seafood okonomiyaki. I'm using frozen seafood mix for this one. It has shrimp, squid, and clams. If you have fresh seafood, feel free to use that instead. I thawed this by soaking it in water and then pat it dry. As usual, let's prepare lots of cabbage. Cut into small pieces. And this is the Naga-imo, Chinese yam that we used in the classic okonomiyaki. I had some leftover, so I'm adding it. You don't have to use it, but I love it because it makes the okonomiyaki super fluffy. Let's make the batter. You can totally make the batter with just water and flour without adding eggs like we did for the Negiyaki. I actually added too much water this time. It turned out fine in the end, but I think a little less water would have made the batter easier to work with when cooking. You can find the correct measurement in my blog or in the description box. For seasoning, I'm using shantan. It's a vegetable and meat stock powder that I love to use in soups, fried eggs, and stir fries. It's also amazing in okonomiyaki. You can use any other stock powder or dashi powder you have. I'm also adding a little salt and pepper. Mix it well. This seasoning is perfect for seafood and it smells amazing while cooking. Add the drained seafood, cabbage, and grated Naga-imo to the batter. The batter is a little too runny, but let's give it a try. Heat up some oil in a fry pan and add the cabbage. Shape it. I added the shrimp at the end because I wanted them to be visible, but it doesn't really matter since we'll be covering it with sauce. I had a little leftover pork belly from the other okonomiyaki, so I added that too. You can enjoy both meat and seafood. Of course, you can just enjoy the seafood if you prefer. Because the batter was too runny, I had a bit of trouble flipping it. But don't worry if you mess up flipping the okonomiyaki. Just do your best to shape it back into a circle. For a moment, I thought I had to start over, but it was totally fine. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. I recommend covering it with a lid to steam it, as it helps the batter set. Thanks to steaming, the batter stabilized and I was able to flip it nicely. Cook it without a lid for a bit to make it crispy on the surface. It might not be a perfect circle, but it tastes amazing. Let's mix the okonomiyaki sauce and mayonnaise together. Cut the pickled ginger into tiny pieces and add it for a nice touch. Finally, sprinkle on some bonito flakes and aonori, and it's done. Now let's make a vegetarian okonomiyaki. And guess what? We are making our homemade okonomiyaki sauce too, so stay tuned. The main feature of this okonomiyaki is that we are using konjac. Konjac has a slightly gummy texture, so if you've never tried it before, you might be surprised, but when you add it to okonomiyaki, it becomes a great meat substitute. Konjac itself is quite bland, so it's perfect for okonomiyaki. Usually, konjac is square shaped like this, but this one has a different shape. I think it's shaped for similar dishes, but it's convenient because it's already cut into small pieces, perfect for okonomiyaki. And this is sashimi konjac. As the name suggests, it's konjac that you can eat like sashimi. This one has a bit of aonori in it. It's usually eaten with vinegar miso sauce. This is also used because I had some left over. For this recipe, we won't be using any eggs in the batter or as a topping, so I think it's also suitable for a vegan. Let's mix the flour and water in the bowl. I'm using kombu dashi powder this time instead of bonito flakes. I'll also add a little soy sauce and salt. Add the cabbage. Chopped konjac. Pickled ginger. And tempura bits to the bowl and mix. If you don't have konjac, you could try using drained tofu. And if you don't have any substitute, you can just make it with vegetable and flour. Some people add natto to their okonomiyaki. Natto is a good source of protein, so it's perfect for vegetarian or vegan okonomiyaki. However, I guess a lot of people don't like natto, so it probably won't be a popular substitute. But they say that natto becomes easier to eat when it's cooked. I love natto, but I've never added it to okonomiyaki before. I might try it next time. Other than that, it's just like making any other okonomiyaki. Heat up some oil in a fry pan. Add all the ingredients. and cook over medium heat for 3 minutes. Cover it with a lid. It's easier to flip that way. I managed to flip it over. Shape it with a spatula and cook it over low heat for 5 minutes with the lid on. I flip it again to get some color on the other side. Once it's crispy, it's done. Now let's make the homemade okonomiyaki sauce. Mix together ketchup, tonkatsu sauce, a little soy sauce, and honey, or beet sugar in my case. Add a pinch of white pepper for a secret ingredient. You can also use Worcestershire sauce instead of tonkatsu sauce. If you do, I recommend adding a little sugar to give it more depth. My husband really liked this homemade sauce. Mayonnaise is optional. I made a wavy pattern with it for fun. I hope you all find your favorite way to make okonomiyaki.